At 11:42 p.m., my daughter sent me 3 words I had prayed she would never have to use. Dad, front porch. That was all. No explanation, no crying emoji, no second message. Just 3 words on a black screen, glowing beside my half-empty cup of coffee while the rest of my house sat silent around me. For a moment, I did not move. Then I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the kitchen floor. My name is Harold Mercer. I am 69 years old, a widower, and according to my son-in-law, I am a weak old man who should learn when he is no longer needed. He said that often, sometimes as a joke, sometimes with a smile, sometimes in front of my daughter Natalie, while she stared down at her plate and pretended not to hear. The first time Jason laughed at me, it was over a jar of pickles. Natalie and Jason had invited me for Sunday dinner. My grandson, Luke, was 6 then, still small enough to run into my arms when I walked through the door. Natalie was making pot roast, just like her mother used to make before cancer took her from us 11 years ago. Jason handed me a jar from the counter and smirked. "Here, Harold. Want to prove you still got it?" I knew what he was doing. Everyone at that table knew. I twisted the lid once. My fingers ached that day. Arthritis had been worse since winter. The lid did not move. Jason laughed loud enough for Luke to look up from his coloring book. "See?" he said, taking the jar from me. "That's what I mean. Natalie keeps acting like you're some kind of protector, but come on. The man can't even open dinner." Natalie's face changed, only for a second, but fathers notice seconds. I smiled and let it pass. That was what I usually did. I let Jason call me slow. I let him call me fragile. I let him say Natalie had her own family now and did not need to keep checking on the old man down the road. I let him believe my silence was weakness because, at my age, you learn something young men rarely understand. Not every fight deserves your hands. But I also watched. I watched how Natalie stopped visiting unless Jason drove her. I watched how her phone calls got shorter when he was home. I watched how Luke stopped telling stories at dinner unless his father was in a good mood. And I watched Jason's hand rest too firmly on my daughter's shoulder whenever she said something he did not like. 3 years earlier, after a bad storm knocked out power across the county, Natalie had asked me why I still checked every lock before bed. I told her that when you spend enough years seeing what people are capable of, caution becomes a habit. She laughed then. But I made her promise me something. If she ever felt unsafe and could not say it plainly, she would text me 3 words. Dad. Front porch. It meant come now. It meant do not call. It meant something inside that house had gone too far. At 11:44 p.m., I pulled my old truck out of the driveway. At 11:57, I turned onto her street. And before I even reached the curb, I saw my grandson standing barefoot on the front porch in the cold, holding his stuffed bear against his chest. Behind him, from inside the house, I heard Jason screaming my daughter's name. Luke saw me before Jason did. His little face crumpled with relief, but he did not run to me. That told me everything. A child who is truly free runs when someone safe arrives. A child who has learned fear waits to see if running will make things worse. I stepped out of the truck slowly. "Hey, buddy," I said, keeping my voice low. "Where's your mom?" Luke pointed behind him with one trembling hand. In the kitchen. The front door was half open. Warm light spilled across the porch, but there was nothing warm about the house. I could hear Jason inside, pacing hard across the floor. "I told you not to bring him into this," he shouted. "You think your father is going to save you?" Natalie answered, but her voice was too soft for me to hear. Jason laughed. That laugh. I had heard it over dinner tables, at birthday parties, in my own backyard, when he wanted everyone to know he was the strongest man in the room. "You're pathetic," he said. "Both of you." Running to an old man who can barely stand up straight. Luke lowered his head. I took off my coat and wrapped it around his shoulders. "Stay right here," I whispered. "Do not go back inside unless I call you." He grabbed my sleeve. "Grandpa, don't make him mad." Those words almost stopped my heart. Not because I was afraid of Jason, because my grandson already understood the rules of that house. Do not spill. Do not speak too loudly. Do not make Dad mad. I touched the top of his head. "That is not your job." Then I stepped inside. The living room looked normal at first glance. Too normal. Pillows straight, television off, family photos lined neatly on the wall. That was the thing about houses like that. From the street, they looked peaceful. Inside, peace depended on one man's mood. In the kitchen, Natalie stood near the sink, with one hand pressed against her cheek. Her hair was loose around her face. A broken mug lay in pieces near the stove, coffee spreading across the tile like a dark stain. Jason turned when he saw me. For half a second, surprise crossed his face. Then came the smile. "Well, look who found his way over," he said. "Did she text you, Harold? Or did you hear weakness calling from down the road?" I looked at Natalie. "Are you hurt?" Jason stepped between us. "She's fine." I did not look away from my daughter. Natalie, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm okay. It was a lie, not a practiced one. Not yet, but a desperate one. The kind people tell because the truth standing beside them is too dangerous." Jason folded his arms. "You need to leave my house." I glanced around the kitchen, the broken mug, the shaking hand, the child outside in the cold. Then I looked back at him. "No." The word was quiet. Jason blinked, like he had not heard me correctly. "What did you say?" I said no. His smile disappeared. For years he had mistaken my patience for surrender. He thought because I let him mock my hands, my age, my limp, my silence, that I had no line left in me. But every old man has a line, and Jason had just crossed mine with my daughter standing behind him and my grandson barefoot on the porch. Jason took one step closer. "You don't get to come into my home and tell me what to do." I reached into my pocket. His eyes followed my hand. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the counter, screen facing up. The call timer was already running. Jason stared at it. Then, from the speaker, a calm dispatcher's voice said, "Sir, are you still inside the residence?" Jason's face changed the moment he heard the dispatcher. Not much. Just enough. His mouth tightened. His shoulders shifted. The confidence he wore so easily began to crack around the edges. "You called the police?" he said. I picked up the phone slowly. "I called before I left my driveway." The dispatcher spoke again. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" I kept my eyes on Jason. "My daughter and grandson are inside the residence. Male subject is angry, possibly intoxicated. Broken property in the kitchen. No visible weapon." Jason laughed, but there was panic under it now. "This is ridiculous. You're making a fool of yourself." Natalie whispered, "Dad?" I knew that tone. She was scared for me. Even now, even with her cheek red and her son outside in the cold, she was still afraid of what Jason might do if someone challenged him. That is how control works. It teaches good people to protect the person hurting them, because they believe keeping him calm is the same thing as keeping everyone safe. Jason pointed at me. "You think this makes you a hero? You think waddling in here with your bad knee and your little phone changes anything?" I did not answer. He hated that. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have no idea what happens after they leave." Natalie closed her eyes, and there it was, the truth. Not shouted, not dramatic, just one sentence slipping out before he could dress it up as concern. From the phone, the dispatcher's voice sharpened. "Sir, officers are arriving now." Red and blue lights washed across the kitchen window. Jason turned toward the glass. For the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely afraid. Not of me, of witnesses. A hard knock came at the front door. "Sheriff's office?" I raised one hand where they could see it through the open hallway. "In here," I called. "Child is on the porch. Adult female in the kitchen." Two deputies entered fast. The younger one moved toward the porch first, crouching near Luke and wrapping my coat tighter around him. The older deputy stepped into the kitchen, eyes moving over everything before he spoke. "Good man." He looked at Natalie's cheek, the broken mug, the phone in my hand, then Jason. "Everyone keep your hands visible." Jason immediately lifted his palms. "Officer, thank God. My wife's father broke into my house and threatened me." I said nothing. The deputy looked at me. "Sir, I came after my daughter sent an emergency message. I called dispatch on the way." "I have not touched him," Jason scoffed. "Emergency message? She's dramatic. She gets emotional." Natalie's face went pale. That word again. Emotional. The word men use when they want pain to sound like a personality flaw. The deputy turned to Natalie. "Ma'am, did you ask your father to come here?" For a second, she looked at Jason. Then she looked at me. And finally, after years of shrinking herself to survive that house, my daughter nodded. "Yes," she said. "I did." Jason turned toward her so fast the older deputy stepped between them. "Don't look at her," the deputy said. "Look at me." Jason raised his hands higher, suddenly offended. "I'm not doing anything." "No," the deputy said. "You're not." That single sentence changed the air in the kitchen. For years, Jason had controlled rooms by deciding who got to speak, who had to apologize, who was overreacting, who was crazy, who was weak. But now there was another man standing between him and my daughter, and that man had a badge. Jason did not like that at all. The younger deputy brought Luke inside and guided him to the couch in the living room. My grandson kept my coat wrapped around him, both hands buried in the sleeves like he was trying to disappear inside it. Natalie saw him and started crying, not loud, just one broken breath. The older deputy noticed. "Ma'am," he said gently, "has this happened before?" Jason answered before she could. "No, absolutely not. We had a disagreement, and her father overreacted." The deputy did not look away from Natalie. "Ma'am?" Jason spoke again, sharper this time. "Natalie, don't do this." The kitchen went still. It was the first honest thing he had said all night. Not "don't lie," not "tell the truth." Don't do this. Because in his mind, telling the truth was something she would be doing to him. The deputy's voice hardened. "Sir, one more word to her, and I'll place you in cuffs while we sort this out." Jason's mouth shut. Natalie looked at me. Her whole face trembled like a person standing at the edge of a bridge, terrified of stepping forward, more terrified of going back. I nodded once. "That was all." She turned to the deputy. "Yes," she whispered. "It's happened before." Jason closed his eyes. The deputy took out a notepad. "What happened tonight?" Natalie looked down at the broken mug. "He was angry because I told him I wanted Luke and me to spend the weekend at my dad's." Jason laughed under his breath. The deputy looked at him. He stopped. Natalie continued. "He said I was embarrassing him. He said my father was making me weak. Then he took my phone." The deputy glanced at the phone in my hand. "How did you text your father?" Natalie swallowed. "Luke's tablet. It's connected to my messages." From the living room, Luke's small voice appeared. "Mom told me the 3 words." No one moved. My grandson looked at the floor. "She said if I ever had to, I should send them to Grandpa." Jason muttered. "Unbelievable." The older deputy finally looked at me more carefully. "Harold Mercer," he said slowly. "Were you with County Court Services?" I took a breath. "A long time ago." Jason frowned. The deputy nodded. "Domestic protection orders, right?" I could feel Jason staring at me now. For the first time, he was seeing more than arthritis, gray hair, and a bad knee. I had spent 22 years walking frightened women through courthouse hallways while angry men waited outside pretending to be misunderstood. I had stood beside judges when restraining orders were signed. I had watched children hold stuffed animals while adults argued about control and called it love. I knew Jason's type before he ever opened a pickle jar. The deputy looked back at him. "Then I'm guessing Mr. Mercer knew exactly what kind of call this was." Jason said nothing. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows, and inside that kitchen, the weak old man he had laughed at for years was no longer invisible. The deputies stayed for nearly 2 hours. They photographed the broken mug, took statements, and spoke to Luke with the kind of softness children remember long after the fear fades. Natalie sat at the kitchen table with a blanket around her shoulders, answering questions in a voice I barely recognized. Not because it was weak, because it was finally honest. Jason kept trying to interrupt from the hallway until the younger deputy put him in handcuffs. "For everyone's safety," he said. Jason looked at me then, not laughing anymore. "You happy now, Harold?" I shook my head. "No," and I meant it. There was nothing happy about seeing my daughter's marriage break apart in the middle of the night. Nothing satisfying about watching my grandson learn words like statement, deputy, and protection order before he learned long division. But there was relief. There was the first clean breath after years of holding it. By morning, Natalie and Luke were asleep in the guest room of my house. Luke still had his stuffed bear under one arm. Natalie had cried until there was nothing left in her but exhaustion. I sat alone at the kitchen table as sunlight came through the curtains, thinking about all the times I had stayed quiet. Maybe too quiet. Maybe I had mistaken patience for wisdom. Maybe part of me had hoped Jason would grow tired of being cruel if nobody fought him. But men like Jason do not stop, because people endure them. They stop when someone finally turns on the light. The next few months were not easy. There were court dates, temporary orders, angry messages sent through relatives, apologies from Jason that sounded more like accusations wearing a nicer coat. Natalie almost went back twice. That is the part people do not understand. Leaving is not one brave moment. It is 100 painful decisions made again and again, often while your heart is still confused. But each time she stayed. She found a small apartment near Luke's school. She started laughing again, slowly at first, like she was asking permission. Luke began spending Friday nights at my house, where we ate pancakes for dinner and watched old westerns his mother said were too boring. One afternoon, months later, Natalie came by while I was fixing the loose railing on my porch. She watched me struggle with a rusted screw and smiled. "You need help, old man?" I looked up. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. Not from her. I handed her the screwdriver. "Show me what you've got." She knelt beside me, and for the first time in years, my daughter looked peaceful. Not fixed, not untouched by what had happened, but free enough to breathe. That night, as she was leaving, she hugged me at the door and whispered, "Thank you for coming." I held her a little longer. Always. Because that is what Jason never understood. Getting older does not mean a man stops protecting his family. A weak body does not mean a weak heart. And silence does not always mean fear. Sometimes silence is just an old man waiting for the right 3 words. If you have ever had to protect someone you love, or if you have ever watched someone confuse control with love, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Harold did the right thing by staying calm and calling for help before walking into that house? If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps and encourages us to keep bringing you new stories like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.